it chapter by chapter, one bite at a time. So many adventures and mountains we can climb. Take it word for word, line by line, one bite at a time.
Welcome to Bite at a Time Books, where we read you your favorite classics one bite at a time. My name is Bree Carlile, and I love to read, and wanted to share my passion with listeners like you. If you want to know what's coming next and vote on upcoming books, sign up for our newsletter at biteatatimebooks.com. You'll also find our new t-shirts in the shop, including podcast shirts and quote shirts from your favorite classic novels. Be sure to follow my show on your favorite podcast platform so you get all the new episodes. You can find most of our links in the show notes, but also our website, biteatatimebooks.com, includes all of the links for our show, including to our Patreon to support the show, and YouTube, where we have special behind the narration of the episodes. We're part of the Bite at a Time Books Productions Network. If you'd also like to hear what inspired your favorite classic authors to write their novels, and what was going on in the world at the time, check out the Bite at a Time Books Behind the Story podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. Please note, while we try to keep the text as close to the original as possible, some words have been changed to honor the marginalized communities who've identified the words as harmful, and to stay in alignment with Bite at a Time Books' brand values. Today we'll be continuing Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. Book 3rd. Accomplishment of the Promise Made to the Dead Woman. Chapter 1. The Water Question at Montfermeil. Montfermeil is situated between Livry and Chelles, on the southern edge of that lofty tableland, which separates the Ourcq from the Marne. At the present day, it is a tolerably large town, ornamented all the year through with plaster villas, and on Sundays with beaming bourgeois. In 1823, there were at Montfermeil neither so many white houses nor so many well-satisfied citizens. It was only a village in the forest. Some pleasure houses of the last century were to be met with there, to be sure, which were recognizable by their grand air, their balconies in twisted iron, and their long windows, whose tiny panes cast all sorts of varying shades of green on the white of the closed shutters. Montfermeil was nonetheless a village. Retired cloth merchants and rusticating attorneys had not discovered it as yet. It was a peaceful and charming place, which was not on the road to anywhere. There people lived, and cheaply, that peasant rustic life which is so bounteous and so easy. Only water was rare there, on account of the elevation of the plateau. It was necessary to fetch it from a considerable distance. The end of the village towards Gagny drew its water from the magnificent ponds which exist in the woods there. The other end, which surrounds the church and which lies in the direction of Chelles, found drinking water only a little spring halfway down the slope, near the road to Chelles, about a quarter of an hour from Montfermeil. Thus, each household found it hard work to keep supplied with water. The large houses, the aristocracy of which the Thénardier tavern formed a part, paid half a farthing a bucketful to a man who made a business of it, and who earned about 8 sous a day in his enterprise of supplying Montfermeil with water. But this good man only worked until 7 o'clock in the evening in summer, and 5 in winter. And night once come, and the shutters on the ground floor once closed, he who had no water to drink went to fetch it for himself, or did without it. This constituted the terror of the poor creature whom the reader has probably not forgotten, little Cosette. It will be remembered that Cosette was useful to the Thénardiers in 2 ways. They made the mother pay them, and they made the child serve them. So when the mother ceased to pay altogether, the reason for which we have read in preceding chapters, the Thénardiers kept Cosette. She took the place of a servant in their house. In this capacity, she it was who ran to fetch water when it was required. So the child, who was greatly terrified at the idea of going to the spring at night, took great care that water should never be lacking in the house. Christmas of the year 1823 was particularly brilliant at Montfermeil. The beginning of the winter had been mild. There had been neither snow nor frost up to that time. Some mountebanks from Paris had obtained permission of the mayor to erect their booths in the principal street of the village, and a band of itinerant merchants, under protection of the same tolerance, had constructed their stalls on the church square, and even extended them into Bollinger Alley, where, as the reader will perhaps remember, the Thénardier's hostelry was situated. These people filled the inns and drinking shops and communicated to that tranquil little district a noisy and joyous life. In order to play the part of a faithful historian, we ought even to add that among the curiosities displayed in the square, there was a menagerie, in which frightful clowns, clad in rags and coming no one knew whence, exhibited to the peasants of Montfermeil in 1823 one of those horrible Brazilian vultures, such as our Royal Museum did not possess until 1845, which have a tricolored cockade for an eye. I believe that naturalists call this bird Caracara polyborus. It belongs to the order of the apicides, and to the family of the vultures. Some good old Bonapartist soldiers who had retired to the village went to see this creature with great devotion. The mountebanks gave out that the tricolored cockade was a unique phenomenon made by God expressly for their menagerie. On Christmas Eve itself, a number of men, carters and peddlers, were seated at table, drinking and smoking around 4 or 5 candles in the public room of Thénardier's hostelry. This room resembled all drinking shop rooms. Tables, pewter, jugs, bottles, drinkers, smokers. But little light and a great deal of noise. The date of the year 1823 was indicated, nevertheless, by 2 objects which were then fashionable in the bourgeois class, to wit, a kaleidoscope and a lamp of ribbed tin. The female Thénardier was attending to the supper, which was roasting in front of a clear fire. Her husband was drinking with his customers and talking politics. Besides political conversations, which had for their principal subjects the Spanish War and Monsieur le Duc d'Angoulême, strictly local parentheses like the following were audible amid the uproar. About Nanterre and Cersnes, the vines have flourished greatly. When 10 pieces were reckoned on there have been 12. They have yielded a great deal of juice under the press. But the grapes cannot be ripe. In those parts, the grape should not be ripe. The wine turns oily as soon as spring comes. And it is very thin wine. There are wines poorer even than these. The grapes must be gathered while green, etc. Or a miller would call out, "Are we responsible for what is in the sacks? We find in them a quantity of small seed which we cannot sift out, and which we are obliged to send through the millstones. There are tares, fennel, vetches, hempseed, foxtail, and a host of other weeds, not to mention pebbles which abound in certain wheat, especially in Breton wheat. I'm not fond of grinding Breton wheat any more than long sawyers like to saw beams with nails in them. You can judge of the bad dust that makes in grinding. And then people complain of the flour. They are in the wrong. The flour is no fault of ours." In a space between 2 windows, a mower, who was seated at table with a landed proprietor, was fixing on a price for some meadow work to be performed in the spring, was saying, "It does no harm to have the grass wet. It cuts better. Dew is a good thing, sir. It makes no difference with that grass. Your grass is young and very hard to cut still. It's terribly tender. It yields before the iron," etc. Cosette was in her usual place, seated on the crossbar of the kitchen table near the chimney. She was in rags. Her bare feet were thrust into wooden shoes, and by the firelight she was engaged in knitting woolen stockings destined for the young Thénardiers. A very young kitten was playing about among the chairs. Laughter and chatter were audible in the adjoining room, from 2 fresh children's voices. It was Éponine and Azelma. In the chimney corner, a cat o' 9 tails was hanging on a nail. At intervals, the cry of a very young child, which was somewhere in the house, rang through the noise of the dram shop. It was a little boy who had been born to the Thénardiers during one of the preceding winters. She did not know why, she said. The result of the cold, and who was a little more than 3 years old. The mother had nursed him, but she did not love him. When the persistent clamor of the brat became too annoying, "Your son is squalling," Thénardier would say. "Do go and see what he wants." "Bah," the mother would reply. "He bothers me." And the neglected child continued to shriek in the dark. Thank you for joining Bite at a Time Books today, while we read a bite of one of your favorite classics. Again, my name is Bree Carlile, and I hope you come back tomorrow for the next bite of Les Miserables. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter at biteatatimebooks.com and check out the shop. You can check out the show notes or our website, biteatatimebooks.com, for the rest of the links for our show. We'd love to hear from you on social media as well.